that outstanding stuff there from Marler. But hey, let's get into these previews, man. So many great games this weekend, and I don't think enough attention is being paid to Kentucky at Ole Miss. Got to start there. Battle of unbeatens, 4-0 versus 4-0. And a great little nugget here from, I believe this was Neil McCready. He's going to be on the next episode of the show, at least scheduled to be at this point in time. Since Kentucky and Ole Miss, they faced off each other, if you remember. I'm sure those fans do, in 2020, the COVID season. Since that season, the 21 season, looking ahead, 18-3 for both Kentucky and Ole Miss, behind only Alabama and Georgia. That's incredible. And that just speaks to the outstanding job Lane Kiffin and Mark Stoops have done with their respective programs. Now they're going to go head-to-head in an epic showdown here in Oxford. So I pulled some stats here, pretty interesting. Kentucky offense versus Ole Miss defense. I got to be honest with you. After looking at these numbers, talking to Marler, talking to some others, I was leaning heavily towards Kentucky. But just look at some of these stats. And I know this doesn't mean everything, but the spread favors Ole Miss. The analytics favor Ole Miss. And how about this? Kentucky offense, number 10 in the SEC in scoring, 13 in rushing, number 10 in touchdowns scored, number 14 in sacks allowed. While you flip it over to Ole Miss defense, number 3 in scoring, number 4 pass efficiency, number 3 in touchdowns allowed, number 2 in turnovers forced, and number 2 in sacks. All those heavily favor Ole Miss, not by a small margin or by any means, but of course Ole Miss is, Shane asked the question, and it's valid at this point in time. Are the Rebels fool's gold? We'll find out certainly on Saturday, but let's focus on Kentucky first of all. J.J. Weaver doesn't sound like he's going to play according to Mark Stoops. That's a blow to this Kentucky defense. Of course, the good news, Chris Rodriguez back in the action, arguably the best SEC in the conference. He should help these numbers immediately. He should help the Kentucky play action game. I mean, he's going to help in a number of ways. So that's big news. That's something Mark Stoops going to talk about here in just a second. But I hate to sound like a broken record, but we got to get this offensive line figured out. And it's not just running the ball, it's protection. Ole Miss is going to come after you. They're not going to let Will Levis sit back and pick you apart, because hell, even Tulsa, again, they had over 100 yards passing in the first quarter last weekend. Their quarterback went down. Otherwise, maybe they win that ball game. So this could be a back-and-forth showdown. Very interesting to see how it plays out. But let's kick it over to Mark Stoops real quick on Chris Rodriguez back in the lineup and on his team really failing to play complimentary football so far this season.
Back this week. What has been your teaching point with him, and how has he responded?
Well, for Chris, it was just a matter of managing him, while he was out, just getting him the reps that we needed to the last week or two. As I mentioned last week, he was getting reps with the first and second team, mainly the second team, or with just different quarterbacks, just to make sure he wasn't totally removed from practicing our plays, along with staying in shape, being on the scout team, doing whatever was necessary, staying in good shape. And for Chris, he just needs to be himself. He doesn't need to come in and be our savior or anything like that, or save our run game, as any of that. We don't need him to worry about that. We just need him to be him, and we need the people around him, the other guys that are playing, to do their job and to strain and to do things better in certain moments.
Marcus, you spoke of playing complimentary football. How frustrating is it that that's not happening right now?
Well, I mean, it's why we work. It's why we do things. There's very few teams out there. You could ask, whoever's 1, 2, 3. Anybody. You're gonna ask any coach right now, and there's gonna be parts of their team that they want to work on. We're not any different. We want to continue to work and grind and get better.
Now, one other thing I really wanted to note here, we'll get to this. He's got more comments here, but Kentucky is obviously in the top 10. Fans are thrilled, but it's wild to sit here and think. You go back to that stat, 18-3 since 21, third best record in the SEC. There's no parades being thrown in Lexington. They're not puffing their chest. They don't really care. We're in the top 10. That's great. They don't even, it's just normal to them. And I know it's only been a month into the season. Let's not crown them yet or anything. They've only played one conference game or anything, but I think you need to take a moment and recognize just the turnaround that's been done by Mark Stoops and company. I know it's been said time and time again, but here we are sitting in the top 10, and they cannot give a damn. They expect to be up there, which is just wild to say, and hell, they are there. They keep winning. They're going to remain there, and they're, the only, if they win this ball game, I mean, I think not that they'll run the table, but Georgia, Tennessee, those may be the only two teams that'll test them if Ole Miss doesn't here on Saturday. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Kentucky could be living in the top 10 all season long. Let's kick it over to Mark Stoops one more time. Asked about getting the recognition and all that for his program. And he really, I thought, had something interesting to say with Jackson Dart. Ole Miss, not truly efficient in the passing game at this point in time because they've been so great running the ball. But even Mark Stoops is well aware Lane Kiffin's got some stuff in his back pocket. He says they're sitting on explosive things that they've been setting up all season. So it's interesting that he's putting that out there. He's well aware. But what those are, we're going to find out here on Saturday.
AP poll, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, USC, Kentucky. How does that hit you? And more importantly, how do you think your team will respond to something like that?
Well, I mean, I like it there. I'd like it to stay there. That's really what's most important. Sure. I mean, it helps with, I think, as I mentioned, the fan base and showing up and having the people there. It helps in recruiting. It helps, with your team. And hopefully it motivates them to practice hard to stay that way, because we know we have a very tough stretch coming up starting here this week. So, our team is mature enough. Certainly there's some young guys that need to still be taught quite a bit. But the leadership of this team knows that that's fine, but it's really about how we practice and how we prepare and getting ready for a really good team and another tough challenge.
I think we're relying a lot on the running game, but what have you seen from Jackson Dart? He was finally officially named their starter at quarterback.
Yeah, I think he's a really good player. He's getting better with every rep. He's explosive. He's making good decisions. There's been games this year where, much like our offense, they've stopped themselves. I'm sure they're sitting there saying, who stopped us? We stopped ourselves. Bad snap, bad, communication, just certain things. But you can see when they're clicking and in a rhythm. He's very talented. He can run, makes good decisions, could throw it. And like I said, they're sitting on a lot of explosives that they're setting up, and they can do a lot of different things.
All right, so flipping over to the other side, Ole Miss. It's interesting. Kiffin, not necessarily taking shots, but he seems a little disturbed by the lack of attendance down there in Oxford. I know Tulsa's not a great game. It was hot, is what I heard. I mean, it's hot across the SEC, and we just went through the stats. I mean, of all the teams that are showing up, of all the fan bases that are showing out in incredible numbers, you think Ole Miss would be there. Longest active home streak since the 40s, he said on Saturday. They're striping out Vaught Hemingway for this game. I mean, this should be some great atmosphere, but some interesting comments here. Kiffin, he called, in a roundabout way, he called the fan base out. Says it looked like a damn high school game in the second half. Everybody left, and how he's really having to coach up the players on being locked in, despite the fact that, the attendance isn't what it should be. It shouldn't be an issue for this game, but it's just very fascinating that Kiffin would throw this out there.
You talked about it all last week and even after the game, and it's kind of become a topic of discussion heading into the SEC opener and all these SEC games coming up. Just how important is fan support for games like this coming up with a top 10 team?
Yeah, again, we utilize any situation to teach our players, and so talk to them again, which we have before, about, hey, regardless of what you come out to before the game or halftime, when you come back out and you run out the tunnel and it looks like, a high school game, playing in a college stadium, you can't let that affect you. I mean, there's psychology to that, obviously. There's a home field advantage for a reason. And, when it goes the other way, and you kind of have that feeling, that, man, are we still really playing in a game here? The players have to fight that. So, again, we use that as a learning lesson for our guys. So, if that's the case, that's the case. But, I mean, I'm worried about what I can control. I've tried social media in here for 2 years, so we'll worry about what we can control, and that's getting our players ready to play.
Cue the rest of the SEC social media accounts. I mean, you got to imagine they're cutting that up and sending it out to recruits. Very, very interesting. But more importantly for this game, give the fans something to be excited about. Can have, much like Kentucky, inconsistent performances. One half you look great. The second half, you don't. And this has happened multiple times. Now, maybe it's just because you're beating the hell out of people. Maybe it's because you got the game well in hand. But go back and watch that Tulsa game. That was not a totally in-hand game. I never truly felt like Tulsa was going to win that ball game, but it was a 7-point game in the fourth quarter. Ole Miss closed the thing out, but Tulsa had their opportunity. So this is far from a flawless team. I'm not going down the road of saying fool's gold. Again, we'll find out on Saturday. It certainly seems like there's obviously been some big upsets this season. And there's been, 1 week your team looks terrible, and then the next they look incredible. Look at Florida last week. I mean, South Florida maybe should have lost that ball game. Tennessee maybe should have won it. I mean, this is, I think, going to be a season-long thing all across football. I mean, look at LSU, how they started out. Now they look like maybe the most improved team from week 1 to week 4 in the SEC. Georgia beats the hell out of South Carolina. Kent State kind of plays with you. I mean, this is across the board. Alabama struggled against Texas. Just blew the doors off Vanderbilt. I mean, week in and week out, you just don't know what you're going to get. But, and in part for the Ole Miss Rebels, maybe that's because Jackson Dart, they don't know what they're getting from him. Still a very young, very inexperienced quarterback. Lane Kiffin talks about Dart's growth and provides an update here on Zach Evans and Ulysses Bentley. They're going to need those guys against Kentucky because Ole Miss, part of the reason they've been so effective on the ground, they can rotate guys in and out, and there's no drop-off. And there's very few programs in the SEC that can say that, particularly as well as Ole Miss this season.
You've been pretty complimentary of Jackson this fall, except for a couple of decision-making. Just where is he right now compared to where you wanted him to be, and what are the things that you kind of need to see more from him in SEC play?
Well, I really like that we didn't have the one disaster play, and so that's growth, because he had that in the previous games where there's one significant play you want to take back, especially the 2 interceptions. So, that was really good to see. Managed the game well at the end, situation of staying in bounds in the game. And, like I kind of said before, we have such high standards, and myself kind of with that position, that sometimes forget how young they are and inexperienced. And, even this morning watching this Kentucky game from 2 years ago, that would be Matt's second game with us, and even though he's played for a while, but with us it's his second game, and you see him make really good plays, but you see him miss some throws, miss some reads in the game, which didn't happen as much last year. So, it's a reminder that, there's a reason experience is important.
What are your expectations this week, availability-wise, for Zach and Ulysses, just kind of getting them back?
Yeah, I would hope they go, and that's when we're at our best, when all 3 are there, and there's some special teams roles that, are involved with that position group too that are important.